again. Time for some more commentaries. I actually had someone mention to me in passing that I did not talk loudly enough on my last few videos, and it's kind of a weird thing because other people, like just in my regular life, have told me that I have a nice resonant, like sort of a loud voice, not obnoxiously loud, but anyway. So I'll try to talk louder on these videos from now on. So once again, picking up on the Forgotten Gems scripts as a starting point for this little project, which is going to probably take quite a while to do and knock out, which I'm absolutely in no big hurry to do. But I will start with, I've done some on Volume 2 already, and now I'm going to regress, but I haven't done every single one in Volume 2. Of Forgotten Gems, but I'll go back to Volume 1 and pick up a few from here. I'm going to try to roll some of these into one video, like it's cover two or three of them per video if I possibly can. Okay, and trying to keep these videos at under 12 minutes. Okay, so let's stop talking and start about technical stuff like loud voices and so forth, and start talking commentary. And again, please, kind of excuse the informal appearance. I've not thought about like set decoration or set design, but maybe by the time I get to the end of this whole project, there'll be like a really nice background or something like that. But I'm not an interior decorator. I actually had a wonderful couch that I just got rid of not too long ago. And the funny story was I ordered a new real leather couch. Don't ever buy faux leather. You'll be sorry you did. It'll eventually start peeling off onto your skin. And but I decided against it. I canceled the order because for reasons that I won't go into. So I'm going to talk today about The Chaser and also Long Distance Call. And if I've got any more room, then I'll talk about other episodes that are other scripts that are in this book. There's kind of a dichotomy between scripts and like a story idea, a script, and what was actually filmed as an episode of television. So oftentimes the differences can be significant, and I might have mentioned that on other videos. But this is what happens in Hollywood. For those of you who don't know, a story is generated by the writer, by the author, whatever you want to call it, and sold, and then the production team does what they will with it. And oftentimes it can be huge. And in movies, like the disparity can be huge, like a huge, not standard deviation, but a huge disparity between what was conceived in the writer's mind, the author's mind, and what actually gets produced. And oftentimes the results are disastrous. Sometimes they can be wonderful, and sometimes they can be completely unexpected in a really good way. So anyway, let's start with The Chaser. And The Chaser was the only script, the only story, only script, only episode in season 1 of the show that was not written by one of the core writers of the show, which would be, for the first season, Matheson, Beaumont, and Serling. I shouldn't put Serling's name last like that, but Richard Matheson, Charles Beaumont, and Rod Serling. And of course, 2 stories by George Clayton Johnson that were, the teleplays were ultimately done by Rod Serling for Execution and The Four of Us Are Dying. Both wonderful, wonderful scripts by George. Stories which were written by him, which Rod later put into episode form, and I'll talk about those on some other videos. But The Chaser was written by Robert Presnell Jr., who happened to be married to, for 40 years, Marcia Hunt. And people know Marcia Hunt from the many, many movies she did in the, starting from the 1930s, up through, I think her heyday was like in the late 30s, and through the 40s she was in a movie called Carnegie Hall in 1947, which was fantastic, and then she later, of course, appeared in a Twilight Zone episode. So The Chaser is an age-old tale about, this guy wants, a girl to love him, and will pay for a potion of some kind, and that we saw that in another episode or 2 of Twilight Zone. Jezebel by Earl Hamner, and maybe 1 or 2 others, but George Grizzard, the great George Grizzard, whose reputation will always be primarily in the theater, and he won Tony Awards and so forth. He was an outstanding actor, and he stars in the episode as a certain man named Roger Shackleforth. And if you think about that name, shackle, unshackling or, whatever, and being shackled, well, it doesn't, he certainly is shackled in the end because he doesn't get to leave this god-awful, annoying woman called Leela, who, she's very pretty, but she's, very annoying. And then ultimately, they conceived a child out of wedlock, and that's the punchline, that after he buys, the original potion, then he buys the antidote, the chaser, for $1,000. And in 1960, when this was first filmed, $1,000 was a lot of money. So it was well done. I think that really the best part of it was, of course, Grizzard, was a fantastic talent. He died a number of years ago now. I did have some contact with him. He's a very nice man, and always based in New York. I don't think his career outside the theater was ever really that significant, as I say, but people do know him for his television work, and especially what he did on Twilight Zone. He was definitely one of the people who helped make Twilight Zone what it became, more for his second episode, which was, of course, In His Image, which was the pilot for the hour-long Twilight Zone format. So I think really the best element of the chaser really kind of comes in its in the set design, in the production. It was just a wonderful production, a simple script, simple story. They did do a special effect kind of a thing at the end with John Mcintyre, and I got to talk about John. At the very end, where he blows this, smokes cigars, and he's seen out on the patio of their presumably New York posh apartment of Leela's cum Roger's apartment in New York City or wherever it happens to be, blowing this smoke heart up the thing. But also the library of John Mcintyre playing Professor Demon, who Roger Shackleforth goes to for the potion. So it's a minor tale, minor kind of a minor sort of a gem, but very good script, which I did publish in this book. And of course, John Mcintyre was a legendary film actor, and I think the early 60s were probably, in the late 50s, were really some of his heyday. He appeared in more than 40 films. I looked up this information at one point. He appeared in more than 40 films in the 1950s, I think. I think it was. And he just had an incredible career. He was married to Jeanette Nolan, who herself starred in 2 Twilight Zone episodes. John Mcintyre was really quite a legend. Yes, here's this information that I put in my commentary in this book. Mcintyre appeared in over 40 feature films in the 1950s. He must have done very well for himself. And then, of course, Jeanette was a very hardworking actress herself. So let's move on now to Long Distance Call, which was written by Bill Idelson. Now, TV fans know Bill Idelson as a terrific writer of television episodes. He wrote for The Odd Couple and many other comedy shows. I can't even list all of them, but I know him for The Odd Couple because he wrote and actually had a role or two on camera. He actually began his career as an actor, and he was a very good character actor. And I think one of his last roles before he died was a few years before he died on Will and Grace, where his daughter, Ellen Idelson, who sadly predeceased him by a few years, she herself was a great writer too of comedy. And so Bill Idelson was definitely he definitely had his career in Hollywood. So forgive me for saying it, but I cannot remember exactly if the screen credit says Charles Beaumont and William Idelson, or William Idelson and Charles Beaumont. It's been too many years since I've seen that episode, so I don't exactly remember what the screen credit says. But it was a solo script by Idelson. Another instance of where Charles Beaumont was, had farmed out his work to friends, and Idelson wrote a very, very good script. And the one thing that was filmed, according to Bill Mumy and some others, including Bill Mumy mentioned this to me, and also Del Reisman, who was associate producer and story editor in those days. He said that a scene where, or the scene where Billy Bales, played by Bill Mumy, was filmed but not included in the final print of the episode, simply because they did not want to, they didn't want to give little kids any ideas. Kids who were thinking about suicide. Believe it or not, people, and this is not a PSA or anything, about mental illness or disturbed children, but there are a lot of kids who not only think about suicide, but actually do it. So they didn't want it. Del Reisman told me we didn't want to give kids out there any ideas. So that scene was deleted, even though it was filmed. And then, so Long Distance Call, I think, really was one of the very spooky episodes of the series. And it was done on videotape, and I don't know really how well that worked. It might have done a little bit better had it been filmed. But the videotape episodes kind of all suffer from the same sort of malady, and that is they just kind of were not that visually interesting. So in the starring role of the young kid was, of course, Bill Mumy, and then his parents were played by Philip Abbott and also Patricia Smith. And Philip Abbott was on another episode or two of Twilight Zone. I know he was on The Parallel in season 4. Had some scenes with Frank Elleter and space agency guy. Very, very good actor. And actually, he and Marcia Hunt, right around the same time, were on an episode of The Outer Limits together called ZZZZZ, the one about the bees with the girl who comes to life as a bee. Anyway, I won't go into that, but that episode actually was produced smack dab in the middle of Kennedy's assassination. So I remember Marcia Hunt mentioned at one time, we got word on the set on the last day of the shooting that our president had been assassinated. And she said, but the show must go on. So anyway, Long Distance Call was very, very good. It's like, here we got somebody, phoning you from the grave. And there were there was another script later in the series by Matheson, of course, Night Call, about somebody phoning somebody from the grave too. So, not really the most original of storylines, but it was very good. And Patricia Smith was a very good actress. She actually was on the first season of the Bob Newhart show in a completely different sort of a role. And as I say, this Long Distance Call really kind of remains a rather popular one, and it was, of course, Bill Mumy's first of 3 appearances on the show. So not a whole lot to distinguish it, but it was a really very well written script, and the very spooky sort of ending that turns into a Christmas Miracle sort of a thing, where Billy doesn't die, although he's right on the brink of death, doesn't die and survives. So that wraps up 2 more scripts that were published, and I'm very glad that Bill Idelson and also Marcia Hunt gave me permission to publish those scripts in the book, and I will see you next time.